Come be a part of Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics with your host, Dr. Ed Holliday. Hear the voices of liberty speaking all across America. Doc Holliday provides thought-provoking interviews and commentary about the issues and actions that are afflicting this country and what we need to do to get America back on track. Get fired up, get inspired, get on board with Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics right now.
And here we go.
And once again, that is the sound of rock cracking, but this time it's cracking for the first time in February 2021. Welcome to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Holliday. You're listening to us right here on webtalkradio.net. And Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. I think we need to become the home of the Anti-Socialist Alliance. How about that? How about that for a name? The Anti-Socialist Alliance. Now, who is that? That's anybody that understands that socialism does not work, will not work, and it is the darkness in the future of America as we lean more and more socialist. So if you're against socialism, listen to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. Let's join others around. I may not agree with a moderate Republican. I may not agree with a very conservative Republican. I may not agree with a conservative. I may not agree with a conservative Democrat. But I will agree with everybody that says socialism is bad for America. And so that's what I mean. And we're talking about, we have people talking about primary in some of these Republicans, and maybe they need that. This is my word. If we're going to go in 2022 and get the socialists out of positions of power, we must work together. So yeah, go ahead and primary all the Republicans you want to, but you make doggone sure everybody understands, no matter who wins that primary, we have got to defeat the socialists. And they say, well, how many socialists in there? AOC, Bernie Sanders? There's more than that. This is what you got to understand. Socialism in America and communism in America, they're not strong enough to stand on their own yet, but all their power derives from the Democratic Party. So until the Democratic Party says we're not going to work with the socialists and get out of this party, until they say that, we must defeat every Democrat that we can. That's the only way to get the socialists out of America power structure. And they are dug in. So the Anti-Socialist Alliance, right here, Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. Now, I got to tell you, we got a great guest coming up in just a few minutes. Dr. Michael Busler, political economics analyst. He's professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. So looking forward to see what he has to say. Got a lot of questions for him. So hang on tight. We'll have him on. But first, let me just remind you what has happened with Joe Biden, President of the United States now. And he accused Trump of being a dictator for doing executive orders last summer when he was running. Well, this is what he had to say.
I got to get the votes. That's why, the one thing that I have this strange notion. We are a democracy. Some of my Republican friends and some of my Democratic friends even occasionally say, well, if you can't get the votes by executive order, you're going to do something. Things you can't do by executive order unless you're a dictator. We're a democracy. We need consensus.
Without even trying for consensus, Joe Biden, on day one, day two, day three, did all these executive orders. He didn't even go to Congress to see if he could get it done. He just automatically did it. And when in the summer he said if a president, he accused President Trump of being like a dictator using executive orders. And here he goes. Democrats always contradict what they say. They say one thing and do the opposite. And whenever they accuse the Republicans of doing something, you can be sure they're doing it themselves. Man, we got a President Biden that, he's being run by a group what group is that running those? Had executive orders all ready to go? Don't believe it's Joe Biden, but that's the way it is. And let's look at this economy. Biden killed tens of thousands of jobs on the first day when he put out his executive order to stop the Keystone Pipeline. And he stopped building the border on the wall of Mexico. And tens of thousands of jobs were lost just directly, but think about all those indirectly. Everything from restaurants and fuel stations and grocery stores. All these people are going to be losing some business and some jobs because of what Joe Biden did with the executive order. So we're going to ask Dr. Busler about that in a couple minutes. But I just want to prepare you for what we should have a great year. Donald Trump said year 2021 is going to be a great year economically, and it should be, from everything being compressed back because of COVID. But if Joe Biden and the socialists start digging into this economy of regulations and cutting out good paying jobs and saying, like John Kerry said, well, they can start building solar panels. Well, I don't think welders get $100,000 a year building solar panels. We can check and see. Maybe John Kerry knows more than we do. But I will say that if the Democrats really start forcing their ideas, they can mess up what's been set up. It's supposed to be a blowout economy this year. Wall Street thinks it's going to be. That's why Wall Street's higher than it's ever been. And we'll just see if they mess this thing up. It looks like they're going to try to. And so, saying that, let's call Dr. Michael Busler. On this week's Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics, we got Dr. Michael Busler. He's a political economics analyst, professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. He's a featured columnist at Newsmax, The Hill, The Western Journal, and townhall.com. I've read many of your articles, and I've never had an opportunity to meet you. We're meeting over the phone, so welcome to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics.
Well, thanks for having me, Doc. It's always my pleasure to be here.
One of the things we are in we look at the economy and politics, and I mean this is your field, and we've got a new president and a country that's very divided, and we got an economy that was running the best it could a year ago. Then COVID hit, and the stock market crashed, came up, and it's as the highest it's ever been, and then we got economic policy. So looking at the big picture, and I know my listeners. We've talked about these things before, but not since President Biden has taken the oath of office. So looking at the big picture, where do you see this economy going?
Okay, so let's go back a little bit and, again, look at the big picture. So this year, the economy, January, February, started off like gangbusters. Looks like we were going to have the best growth rate year we've had in decades. Of course, then the virus hit. We were forced to shut the economy down from mid-March to the end of April. That plunged the economy into a very deep but short-lived recession. The economy opened up again in May, and May, June, July, and August, we saw tremendous economic growth. The economists would say we had a V-shaped recovery, which means the economy dropped very quickly, but it didn't stay low very long, and it rebounded very quickly. Then, starting in September, things started to slow down again, mostly because the governors of 8 or 9 large states shut their economy down completely, or at least partially. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Illinois, Michigan, California, Washington, Oregon, shut their economy down either completely or at least mostly. Now, that counts for about a third of GDP in the U.S., right. So the V-shaped recovery started to flatten. What the government should have done at that point was pass a second stimulus package. But for a number of reasons, probably mostly political, right. Congress decided to wait until after the election and then try to get something through. And it really wasn't until the end of December that a package was passed. Now, that was about 2 or 3 months too late, and the economy had started to flatten. For the year just released, GDP shrank we had negative growth of about 3.5%. That's the worst year we've had in decades.
Right.
However, again, we are starting on that V-shaped recovery, although it's been flattened. So what's going to happen now? The Biden administration says we need another stimulus package. They're looking at something close to another $2 trillion. Now, these stimulus packages are both good and bad. They're good in the short term. The first stimulus package passed in spring, got the V-shaped recovery started. The second one, a little bit late in December, but it should help a little bit. Another stimulus package should stimulate the economy even more. And assuming we can get enough vaccines out and get the economy back to normal, maybe by late spring, early summer, most economists are forecasting that this year we'll see pretty good economic growth. Now, I said the stimulus is both a good thing and a bad thing. So on the good side, it's stimulating the economy, ending the recession, bringing things back. On the bad side, the government doesn't have this money. So
that's what I was waiting for you to get to that. So so what does this mean?
Yeah. So what it means is the federal government really since the early 1960s has been running a deficit in the budget every year, with the exception of 97, 98, 99, and 2000. We didn't have a deficit, but every other year, 53 of the 57 years, we've had deficits in the budget. So what happens? In order to finance the deficit, the government sells bonds. So they sell the bonds, pulling money out of capital markets. So they sell the bonds to finance the deficit. Now, there's no mechanism in place to ever pay the bonds back. In other words, we pay the interest every year on them, and then in 10 or 20 years, when the bonds mature and come due, we don't have the money to pay them back. So what happens? We sell new bonds to pay back the old bonds, and we roll over the debt. As a result, the public debt, total of all these deficits, public debt keeps growing. How bad is it? Prior to the pandemic, the total public debt was around $23 trillion. Right. In fiscal year 2020, which ended the end of September, we added another $3 trillion. So we're now up to $26 trillion. We passed a nearly $1 trillion stimulus package in December, takes us up to $27 trillion, and now they're talking about another $2 trillion stimulus will take us up to $29 trillion. Is that a problem? Is that a problem?
Well, Dr. Busler, before you answer that, let me just we say numbers, and I think this is the American public gets used to, 23 trillion, 23 billion. They don't realize now what other country is there any. Put that in perspective. What other countries in the world, you may not know, but if you guesstimate, but does any other country have anywhere near the size of debt that we have? I'm not talking about percentage-wise, but I mean we're talking about going on $30 trillion. Do other countries owe trillions of dollars, or do you know? Wait just a minute, Dr. Busler. Think on that, and then let me remind our listeners, you're listening to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. You're listening to us right here on webtalkradio.net, and we are listening to Dr. Michael Busler, and he's a political economics analyst, and he's given us some brilliant insight on this economy and where we are, and about to we just asked him a question about our $30 trillion debt almost, and do other countries have that same debt? And so we're going to get his answer in just a minute. But let me take this time to remind you, we have a book that you can order by going to docholiday.org. That's www.docholiday.org, holiday with 2 L's in it. And we got a book called Bedrock Truth. I wrote that book along with Dr. Alveda King, Dr. Alex McFarland. You can get that book by going to our website. Got some other books you can get there. But let me just say, go to the website, and we will have to build that up as the Anti-Socialist Alliance. How about that? Maybe we'll get working, changing it up a little bit so that we will update where we are in this world, fighting socialism. So, Dr. Busler, let's see, have you been able to check on that as far as the do you know other countries that have a debt as much as we do, $30 trillion? Do you know?
No country is anywhere close to that. I don't have the exact numbers, but I think the worst public debts with other countries are only in the $1 or $2 trillion range.
Right.
I'm not 100% sure of that, so I do have to check. But let's put that number in perspective. So most economists will say if the public debt is less than 1 year's GDP, you're probably okay. Now, for other countries in the world, they're all in that position. The debt is less than 1 year's GDP. The U.S., our GDP this year will be probably in the $21 trillion range. So we're almost 50% more than 1 year's GDP. So why is that a problem, you might ask? Well, the answer is you have to pay interest on that debt. Even though the interest rates are very low, we'll spend $400 billion this year on interest. That's about 10% of all government spending, and it's $400 billion that can't be used for good things like infrastructure and all kinds of things. So the interest expense is getting high. The second problem is if the federal government keeps selling bonds and pulling trillions out of the capital markets, there's going to be less available for business when they go to raise capital for expansion. And if business can't raise capital and to meet new demand and they can't expand, the result is you tend to stagnate the economy. And if they can't meet the new demand by increasing output, the only thing left to do is to raise prices. So if we continue on this road, it will lead probably to a stagflation, which means a stagnant economy with inflation and rising prices, something we haven't seen since the 1970s.
And if we have the rising interest rates, then all of a sudden that $400 billion we pay a year could double or even triple, correct?
Exactly. We're at historically low interest rates right now, but as these bonds mature and we roll them over, we're going to eventually interest rates are going to start to go up. We're going to have to start selling bonds at higher interest rates, and you're exactly right. The interest expense could go up significantly.
Well, now, Dr. Busler, that gets a big picture. It's not really a pretty picture, but looking at the little picture, we had even last week, going on this week, with look at the stock market, and we're not going to go deep into it. We can't, but GameStop, and you got the market stopping, and then the big tech saying, "Hey, you got to stop this." What the Wall Street board, Reddit board that people were hurting the big hedge funds who had shorted GameStop, and little investors around the world, especially the United States, buying it up. And they weren't prepared for that. The Wall Street big firms that always had their way to make money like a big python, they're going to squeeze a company to death. And then these little investors have put the hurt to them. So is this an effect, or how does these how does this fit into the big picture? Are we going to see more things like that?
Well, what happened with GameStop was a new phenomenon. I'm not sure what's going to happen going forward, but let me talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
The stock market in general is probably going to continue to go up this year, and the reason is when investors look at how much they're willing to pay for a share of stock, it depends on their anticipation of future earnings. So if you think a corporation profits are going to go up, the value of the stock is going to go up. So those are stocks that you buy, you're willing to pay a little more for. If you think the future of the company is negative and they're going to start having decreases in profit or even losses, the stock will be worth less, so you'll be willing to pay less. So because the market in general continues to go up, it means that investors believe the economy will recover strongly and you'll see big profits throughout this year. Most economists believe that the virus will probably be under control by maybe June-ish, and the second half of the year we should see a lot of this pent-up demand start to come out, and the economy really rebound quickly and corporate profits go up. So I think for this year, the stock market is signaling they expect a good year after the virus. Now, specifically about GameStop.
Fighting for time here, and I wanted to get to one more thing, but go ahead and
okay. Let me just
GameStop
mention real quick. So large hedge funds shorted GameStop, which means they believe GameStop profits would continue to plummet. So what they did, shorting means you borrow the stock from your stockbroker, sell it today at what you believe is a high price, and then you tell the stockbroker, I'll return it in 60 days or so, and you expect to be able to buy it back at a lower price, and therefore you've made a profit. So what the people, small people did, they saw that the hedge funds had shorted this position, and they have to buy the stock back within 60 days. So all the little guys started pushing the price of the stock way up, and when the hedge funds had to buy it back, they were buying it back for much more than they paid for it, and they ended up losing money. How will this continue in the future? It sort of remains to be seen. I don't know what the Securities and Exchange Commission may do about this.
Well, it's a phenomenon that's surprised everybody, but especially the hedge funds. But I did want to, and that's you were painting this picture, and as we expect the economy to get better, what about? I know the first day in office, executive orders and President Biden just cut out the Keystone Pipeline and all the jobs associated with that, and then and stopped building the border wall and all the jobs associated with that. I know it's a drop in a bucket with all the jobs in the country, but is that a good precedent, or is that precedent where so many people think we get this green economy, or like former Secretary Kerry, the climate czar, said, well, those welding on the pipes, they can go make solar panels. So how does that affect the economy? Is that going to have a major effect this year or down the road, or what do you think about that?
The effect this year, I don't think, will be real significant, although, as you say, there are tens of thousands of jobs being lost so far by President Biden's executive actions. The thing with Biden, and he did it when Obama was president too, their number one priority is to cure perceived social injustices. It's injustice everybody doesn't have health care. It's injustice there's not enough food stamps to go around. So they work on that rather than concentrating on economic growth. Did to the energy sector, we finally got to be energy independent. So it doesn't matter if people in the Middle East start fighting with each other and cut off the oil. We make our own, and gasoline kept the price very reasonable, under $2.50 a gallon in most parts of the country, and some even less than that. And from a political standpoint, it allows us to be independent and not have to worry about some of these countries in the nations that are really not very friendly.
Absolutely,
to us. So I think cutting off the Keystone Pipeline, which took Canadian oil, Canadians have the oil, they don't have the refinery capacity, so it piped the oil down to Oklahoma and wherever it was going in the south, and that is good for both Canada and the U.S. Because now we would have had plenty of energy, but now that's gone away. Some of it may be transported by train, which is much more expensive and actually environmentally worse than going through a pipeline. Some of it will get sold to perhaps people we didn't want it necessarily sold to. So I think that's a bad thing. It's hurting short-term jobs. People that work on the pipeline, oil is something you need people there every day because you're producing oil every day. In the solar and wind, you put it up and you don't need people operating every day. So the salaries are about half of what they could have earned in the oil industry, and there's going to be far less jobs. This idea about the green energy is going to create many millions of new jobs simply isn't true. We'll create some new jobs, but not nearly as many as you're going to lose. And the last part is, when President Trump got into office, remember we had 80 to 100,000 illegal immigrants coming in every month and essentially being caught and released into the system. They're willing to work for a lot less money, because they're just happy to be here, for a lot less money than Americans. So it depresses wages and eliminates the number of entry-level positions typically for Americans. so far, everything Biden has done, he believes it's for a social good, but what it's done is hurting the U.S. economy and the American worker.
Well, Dr. Busler, you've put out the big picture and little picture. Appreciate you being on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics, and very informative. And we look forward to getting you back one day. We'll see how President Biden's doing down the road.
Thank you for having me, Doc. It's my pleasure to be here. I do look forward to doing this again.
And that was Dr. Michael Busler, and we appreciate him coming on the show. And now I am more enlightened. I hope you are. I do have a lot more questions. I wish we'd had more time. That's why I said we have to get him back on the show. We did not even get to look into cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, what's going on there, as there's been a huge rally in Bitcoin. And if we print more money, which we're going to do when we're borrowing more and more money, that means we're printing money. And like you said, we don't have anything to back it up. We're just printing paper money, so it means our dollars will become less and less. Does that mean Bitcoin's going to go up, up, up and keep going up? I don't know, but it makes sense that it would. And cryptocurrencies, are those who don't understand, you got Bitcoin as the sort of the granddaddy. It was the first currency built on computers, the blockchain technology, but there's actually hundreds and even more than 1,000 of little, what they call altcoins. Some of them are very tiny, some of them very useful, some of them may grow to be humongous in their market share and how much money they're worth. So a lot of people that may get tired, these people that are on the Reddit, Wall Street Bets Reddit board that have been curtailed and some made fun of, kicked off, and then you had Robinhood who forced their people using their service to said you could only sell, you can't buy any more GameStop, you can only sell. They did that, forced that order on them. So they don't have that in the cryptocurrency markets because it's not regulated by the SEC, so to speak, at this point, to the degree that the stock market is. So what does that mean? And just like this GameStop and the in the AMC theaters was part of being run up by this group, and the little guys, if they grasp more power, does that mean to say, hey, if they kick them out of the stock market and won't let them, compete with the big fat cats, or the big fat cats don't want them in there, they want to keep reaping the rewards that they've fixed for themselves in so many ways. So does that mean these all these entrepreneur young millennials that are in Robinhood, will they go to cryptocurrency where they don't have to fight the Fed, where they don't have to fight all the Wall Street insiders? I don't know. If they do, you could see fortunes made into cryptocurrency, no matter what the stock market does. So interesting times we live in, and you're listening to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. We're glad you're here. Tell your friends and neighbors. I wish President Biden had not been inaugurated. I wish that he had not been in position to be called the winner. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to be one of these people that says, hey, it was stolen. I will say we should scan the ballots, as Jovan Pulitzer and others have called for. Let's have Republicans and Democrats, and let's open up, look at the ballots, make sure they're all legal, and that can easily be done with technology we have. That's what we need to ask for, scan the ballots. I'm not saying it was a stolen election. I'm saying it's not a fair and honest election till we all get to look at how you did the results. And that's the election integrity. So we'll continue to fight for that right here on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. And we'll look at this interesting year that is unfolding before our very eyes. See you next week right here on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics.
Thanks for joining us today, and remember to listen again next week for another edition of Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. You can order Ed's new book, Bedrock Truths, by clicking on the book cover right in front of you on the screen, or visit DocHolliday.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.